Okay, so this week, week 6, we had Harper, Clayton, and Joseph and Hirschfield. So I'm going to start with Harper, and I specifically want to think of his section on page 191. He writes, participants at the predominantly white institutions in Fry's, Britt, and Turner study had to spend more time educating white peers and professors and disrupting flawed assumptions about minoritized persons. These energies could have been invested into academics and outcomes productive out-of-class experiences they maintained. So if we hold that quote in tandem with the Clayton piece about biracial identity at historically Black colleges and universities and historically white colleges and universities, the biracial students at the historically white colleges and universities strengthened their racialized identity through an awareness of racism and racist experiences, as well as an exclusion of whiteness. And so I'm thinking of this experience in Harper's piece where the accumulation of all of these experiences as a biracial student or a minoritized student or a student whose racial identity isn't fully formed yet, but is now strengthened in one direction on this continuum that Rockamore and Laszlo developed in 2005. If that is strengthened because of these experiences on the historically white campuses, because they are singled out for their perceived identity and an exclusion of being accepted into the norm, an othering, a consistent othering. And I'm also thinking about on page 252, Clayton continues to talk about biracial students on these historically white colleges and universities, that the encountering of colorblind ideologies are making them unprepared for these experiences, and that 2 out of 3 respondents dropped out of college cited negative campus race relations as a contributing factor in their withdrawal. That also ties back to Harper and his examination of these papers in Am I My Brother's Teacher? That particular area isn't studied. We talked about this last week too, where sorry, I'm like losing my train of thought as I'm talking, that that students are not, and faculty of color too, students of color are not asked about why they're leaving. They're in these studies, they're assumed to have left because of other external factors that are not including what the institution is actually doing, or factors within the institution. Okay, and that goes back to his piece this week, Harper's piece this week, in his idea of peer pedagogies, or terming it this way, that the students who are continuing on, that 1/3 of those Black male undergraduates who are resisting, he says resisting just survival, but thriving and going on to graduate from the institution. that it's a direct result of these peer experiences, and that I think it's on page 203, he's writing, they learned actual strategies from peers and groups such as BMU who have figured out how to deal productively with onlyness, stereotypes, and racial insults, and other potentially harmful encounters with white faculty and peers. So these are in conversation with one another. And what I'm thinking too with these summer bridge programs that he talks about also on 203, that these summer bridge programs, combining efforts with the Black student unions of the university, as well as high school Black student unions, so that there is this bridge between these two spaces, and students are set up for experiencing Harper's concept of peer pedagogies and ultimately succeeding in these predominantly white institutions. So this longer term success partnership, as he writes, because these bridge programs are also about joy and celebration and solidarity, as opposed to just having this emergency effort and burden of racial problem solving, which in Joseph and, can't say this last name right, Hirschfield's cultural taxation piece, we can see is extremely, it's not just extremely negative. What do they write? I have it written down. I apologize for being all over the place. I just taught 150 kids online. So, so they move beyond Padilla's definition of cultural taxation, the expectation placed on faculty of color that they should address diversity-related departmental institutional affairs. So thinking of cultural taxation also as what students are experiencing, Harper's kind of definition of onlyness, that they then become this tokenized figure, or the expectation is you have to then speak for your entire race. That burden is also mirrored in their expansion, and they call it differential legitimacy, and that is composed of lack of belonging in their department, questioning faculty of color's qualifications, colleagues devaluing faculty of color's research, and faculty of color proving themselves. So I'm thinking of that also with Harper, and the othering process that occurs at predominantly white institutions for students of color, specifically Black students, and the lack of belonging in this space. If they're not, if they don't have that peer leadership, that peer mentorship, then that lack of belonging is strong. Questioning of their qualifications within the classroom space. He goes into detail about several different experiences, one of which a professor calling out a student in as he's leaving for earning 100% and questioning his abilities. Colleagues devaluing faculty of color's research, so other students devaluing their legitimacy or the student's ability to have earned a place at that institution, and faculty of color proving themselves, mirrored in Harper's piece as students constantly having to prove themselves within class, that overburdenedness that both papers talk about, that they have to, the constant proving themselves in the classroom, outside the classroom space, within clubs and organizations. So what I'm kind of thinking after tying these pieces together is I think that there could be a text on cultural taxation and peer pedagogies, as well as biracial students on historically white college campuses and universities all at once. I think that's where kind of the next step would be, because Harper, in his anti-deficit achievement framework, is suggesting or arguing that peer pedagogies have become the answer, not necessarily that it is the answer to graduating from PWIs. And in Clayton's piece, we see that racial identity is changed and strengthened towards Blackness, is strengthened in two different ways depending on the college one is attending, but that this navigation of racism, if we're using this peer pedagogy approach in HWCUs, then maybe we could get to a place of not, I'm not sure. I feel like I'm rambling right now, but that's where I feel like a next step could be playing with these three pieces. I would really want to go into detail because Harper almost does with Joseph and Hirschfield's expansion of differential legitimacy within faculty of color, but Harper is touching on the student experience, which is almost identical. Yeah, I hope I'm getting better and growing through these videos, because I'm really taking all of your feedback into account, and I'm writing detailed notes, and then I start talking and I'm not sure if I'm rambling or not, because it's just me talking to a screen.